And now it's time to preview an upcoming game with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at another Kickstarter preview. This time we're going to take a look at Asteroid Miner by Perhelion Games, which is a game for 2 to 6 players in which each player is going to be controlling a crew of miners and different engineers and researchers who are trying to go out into an asteroid belt and get the most ore in order to sell it off and earn victory points and money in order to continue their adventures and hopefully have the most victory points by the end of the game. Now this is a Kickstarter preview, but this quality component that I have here, or this quality edition that I have here, is very, very similar to the final print run of the game. So this is exactly, or very close to exactly like what you're going to get when you get your copy of Asteroid Miner. But real quick, before I get too much into that, let's take a look at what you're going to get inside of the box. We're going to see how the game plays, and then we'll come back here and I'll sum it all up for you at the end. So here you can see the main board for Asteroid Miner. We're going to look at this board, then we'll look at an individual player's board because there's far too much to show in one segment here. So what we're looking at is the Earth surrounded by an asteroid belt, and that belt is divided into 12 sections to represent 12 turns. If you would like, you can use a little chip here to put the asteroid C into the 6th turn and play a shorter game. So that's available if you'd like, just play 6 turns, with C being available in the middle of this belt. But the idea here is that each of these turns shows different availability of different asteroids, and the players are going to be trying to assemble a crew to mine these asteroids for ore and sell that ore either to trade ships with contracts, earning money and victory points, or to take it back to their HQ and sell it directly for less money but easier victory points. Now each of these areas, or each of these turns, is divided into 3 different sections: the near, middle, and far asteroid belt. And you'll see that certain asteroids are available in each of these sections. For example, A, B, and C on the first turn are available in the near, whereas D and J are available in the middle, and nothing is available in the far. In order to reach these asteroids, you have to have different levels of engine, or different travel capabilities, and you'll see this track down here marks those capabilities. There is close, and that will allow you to access any of the close ones, so they're available all of the time, no matter what, as long as you're on the appropriate turn. There are middle, which will allow you to access the middle ones when you're on that turn. So right now, if you had middle, D and J would be accessible. And then there are far, which would give you access to nothing on this turn, but on the next turn, F and H would become accessible. Each of these individual asteroids is represented by one of these boxes up here. You can see that we have Ada and Bertha and Capec, A, B, and C, and so they're all represented by those. These cubes tell you how much ore is available on them, and you'll see there are 3 different ore types: black, white, and gray. So for example, Ada has 4 black ore and 2 gray ore, but no white, whereas Hector here has 5 white ore and 3 black ore, but no gray. So what you're trying to do is send your team out to build bases on here, mine that ore, and then take it back and sell it for victory points in one way or another. All of your employees will be able to mine gray or black ore, but only special employees will be able to mine white. These are miners, of course, and depending on what employee you use to mine, you're going to get better efficiency. For example, mining 1 gray with the right employee could yield multiple cubes of ore that you can sell later. Each of these areas also has places to build bases, and you can build bases if the asteroid is accessible to you. They will cost $10, $15, or $20, but this can be reduced if you use the right employee to build the base. So each of your employees throughout the game that you'll see momentarily will have different abilities, allowing you to build different things or to get different benefits for using them for specific actions. Also on the board you can see a victory point tracker, which you'll get victory points for selling off ore cubes either to transport or from your base. And then you can see a track for wages, which is going to keep track of how much you could theoretically have to pay all of your employees. Each employee will have a different wage, and as you accumulate new employees, you'll have to increase this tracker in order to show how much wages you could have to pay if you use all of your employees on a turn. This track will also be the tiebreaker for turn order. And turn order will be shown here as the victor being in the lead, and then at the end will be the person who's currently losing. This is based off of victory points, but can be tie broken based off of wages, and then after that based on the number of cubes that you have available. Finally, we have the fleet capacity track here, and each player starts with a fleet capacity of 3. If they take an action with their employees in order to move things around, this will be moving cargoes or moving employees out onto bases or back from bases, they can only move a maximum of 3 right now. This is a capability that can be increased, much like engines, by doing research and spending research from your employee's base in order to increase it, and it generally costs 5 of your research in order to increase it 1 step, which will allow you to move more stuff on your turn as long as your employees are capable of moving it. Finally, let's talk about these cards that are off to the side here. We can see that these cards are transport cards. They're different transports that want different number of cargo. We'll see at the top that there's a number here that kind of tells you how much each cargo is worth. If you've placed cargo on here, you're going to get $8 per cargo that you sell to the ship when the ship departs. In addition, you'll see 3 spaces here which are contracts that can be taken for that ship. And when you place on there, you're contracting to sell this number of cubes, for example 2, and when you take the contract, you're going to get an advance of $10. If you have an agent who makes the deal, you can also place a cube into this little agent area, or multiple cubes, in order to increase the amount of money you'll get per cube by 1 for each cube that you place with your agent, and you're going to go ahead and kind of have a buffer on supplying 2 cubes. If I have an agent who has a contract ability of 1, placing 1 cube here, if I miss my goal of 2, I'm not going to lose victory points for not satisfying my contract. When these ships leave, you'll get paid per cube that you sell to it, and you'll also get 1 victory point per cube that you supplied up to your contract amount, and you'll lose victory points for each cube you didn't supply if you don't have a buffer. So, the ships will leave when all of the gray spaces are filled, although you'll note that there are black spaces you can fill as well in order to get in extra cubes to earn more money. And these ships will get better as the game goes on. You'll see, or bigger at least, you'll see that the ships will get larger, they'll have more spaces available on them, they will give you more money for taking the contracts, but you will need to supply more cubes. In addition, there are going to be employee cards that become available at the end of the first turn, and these employees will be better than your base ones. We'll talk about employees in just a moment when we show you the employee board. So here you can see a player board and the HR area. This we'll cover in just a moment. But a player's board is going to be divided into their employees' headquarters. You'll see we have 1, 2, 3, 4 employees here, 3 of which are basic, and 1 of which is a specialized employee that you deal out randomly or select at the beginning of the game, as well as 3 more areas for holding employees. 1 is currently empty, and the other 2 have to be opened up by paying for them, either 12 or 17 credits. Each player will also have a set of bases that they can use to build out on asteroids if they're available, which they'll need to do in order to send employees to, in order to mine ore, in order to take that ore and sell it. Up at the top, you're going to see the action placement areas. It's mainly these right here, and these are going to be where you're going to be moving your employees to in order to take different actions. And different actions will be based on the abilities of different players, or different employees, and will give you different things throughout the game. Now, each of these employees looks kind of like this. They're going to have a picture. They're going to have some abilities printed on them. For example, this one's abilities are 0, 0, 0. 2 for his ability to sell cubes or make deals with cubes. 2 for his ability to transport players or cubes around. Employees or players. And 1 for his research ability. Underneath that, you're going to see a mining ability, and that's going to tell you how well he can mine cubes if he's out on an asteroid base. For example, he can mine, and when he mines black, he will get 1 cube. When he mines gray, he'll get 1 cube, but he cannot mine white. As I said, it requires specialized miners in order to do that. In the bottom right-hand corner, you will see his wages, which are 1, and this helps determine how much you have to pay him at the end of the round if you do indeed use him. So different employees will have different abilities. These first 3 right here are all basic employees with the basic abilities I just showed you, but things like the captain that this player was dealt for the start will have a higher ability to transport people. When he transports, he can move 3 things around instead of just 2, and that would actually match with your starting fleet capacity because you have a fleet capacity of 3, meaning you can move 3 things on a turn, and this guy can move 3 things in 1 action. However, his wages are 2. Other employees will have different benefits. For example, the researcher will allow you to research better, has a higher research value. Or the engineers are going to have high values that discount the amount of building things on the board. And also reduce your ability or your requirement to upgrade things when you pay research in order to upgrade things on the board. Miners will allow you to mine white cubes usually, although this one doesn't, but sometimes just have higher amounts of cubes they generate for mining certain things. For example, this guy here, every time he mines black ore, will get 2 cubes instead of 1. We have another generic, and then we have a agent here who is able to make contracts with these ships out here, and when she does so, gets a reduction in the amount that she has to supply in order to not lose victory points, and also is able to sell more cubes if she decides to sell cubes from the HQ. So, in short, this is a worker placement game, and getting better workers are going to give you better abilities in order to do things, but they're going to cost you more in terms of wages, which you'll have to pay at the end of each round. So, what do these different actions do? Well, you're going to be moving your workers from their area out here onto these different worker placement spots in order to take actions. And there are several of them here, as well as the ability to move your workers out to the main board in order to mine cubes. So let's take a look at these. If we place in this area here, we're allowed to build a base. We can build a base on any asteroid we have access to, so the ones that are accessible on the turn, either close, near, or close, middle, or far. And it costs us 10, 15, or 20 of our credits, which we start with 50, in order to build that base. Now, we can reduce that by having a higher engineering skill here, or the skill on this guy, the first one here, says that we would reduce this cost by 5 if we used that worker to do it. If he was out on our board, we use him and we build it for cheaper. So we can build a base, and building a base will allow us to mine. We can expand our HQ, paying the money that's available on these boards to open up a new spot for another worker. And the more workers we have, obviously, the more actions we can take, and the more diversified their skills can be. Or we can upgrade our tech, and that would be spending research that's generated by conducting research over here. Usually upgrading a tech will cost you 5 research cubes, and you will be able to either fly more things per turn, moving more cubes and employees around, or to travel further out into the asteroid belt and access asteroids that are not accessible to some of the other players who have a lower level of technology. One of the other areas that's directly linked to this is conducting research. And if we were to conduct research by placing one of our workers into here, we are going to go ahead and generate research based on the research ability of whichever employee we're using. So for example, if we take a look at the number 1 guy we have here, he has a 1 in his research. So he's going to make 1 research cube. If we had used a researcher who has a better research ability, the research would go over to the lab. If we used a researcher who has a better research ability, say she was our number 1 instead, we would generate 2 cubes. And as I said, you're going to need 5 of these cubes in order to upgrade something, unless you use one of the guys who has a discount to the upgrading. So this guy has a 1 in his upgrade. It says that he is going to get a discount of 1 when trying to upgrade on something. So he would only need 4 in order to upgrade one of your techs. Instead of making research, if you already have some research, you can sell off your research cubes from this area up to your research amount in order to make $10 per research, and that's going to be a way to accumulate money that you're going to need to pay your wages. If we send someone to the signing contracts or sell from storage area, this is how we're going to sign up in order to send cubes off to one of these transport ships that we talked about earlier. Dependent on their signing contract ability, if they have one or not, you're going to be able to get a bonus, as I said, to the reduction of the amount that you're going to have to supply. If you aren't able to supply everything, you might lose victory points. In addition, when you sell, if you have a bonus, you're going to get extra credits per cube that you sell. So you'd be able to put a cube onto one of these, essentially showing that you took that contract. You would get some money, in this case 10, and you would need to supply 2 cubes unless you used an agent who would give you a bonus, and maybe you only need to supply 1. When you do, when the ship takes off after all of the gray are filled, you're going to get 8 plus 1 if you have a bonus per cube that you supplied, so in this case 9, or 18 if you did supply both cubes. Selling from storage would require that you have cubes that you've mined and taken back to your storage area, and we'll talk about that just momentarily, but you may sell cubes up to the basically handshake ability of your employee. This one has a handshake ability of 2, so he could sell up to 2 cubes, and he gets $2 plus his contract bonus if he has one for each cube, but also 1 victory point that he would mark on the board. And so each time you get rid of a cube, be it via transport or via selling one directly from your HQ, you get a victory point. The last type of action you can take is transporting ore and miners, and this is going to be moving some of your employees either out here to the board or back from the board out to here, and also moving ore that you've made out on the main board off to transports or back into your storage area to be sold. We will show you more about that in just a moment out on the main board, because it's kind of hard to talk about out here. Finally, you'll see that we have this row of guys here, and we kind of talked about this earlier. Each turn is going to be divided into phases, and this won't happen on the first turn, but in every other turn it will. You have the option to buy one of these employees. When you do so, you're going to pay the wages that are in the bottom right-hand corner. This one is a wages of 3 times 5. It costs you $15 to hire this employee, and you would put them into a new slot on your base or replace one of your employees that you already have. That would give you another worker. Any of these that aren't bought in this phase, and you'll be able to buy in turn order, any of them that aren't bought will become cheaper. You'll put out these markers that say 4x, and the next turn they will only cost 4 times their wages. A turn after that, they will cost 3 times if they aren't bought again, and after that they'll be removed. These will be replenished at the end of each turn, so more employees will become available and you'll have more options. After that, you're going to take all of your workers in turn order, and you're going to do all of your actions before the next player does theirs. So you have the option to build bases or upgrade, to sign and make contracts or sell cubes in order to conduct research or transport and make ore and sell that ore. And then another player will have that option. So you kind of have to figure out the order of how you'd like things to go. At the end of each turn, you're going to do bureaucracy, and the ships that have been filled, we'll talk more about these again in a second, will leave and you'll get credits and victory points. New employees and new ships will become available on the board. The turn order will reset based on victory points, and then we'll go ahead and advance the turn marker and start the next turn until 12 turns are done. Real quick, let's take a look at that final action of transporting ore and miners, seeing how that will affect the gameplay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about transporting ore, having miners out on colonies, and being able to, of course, supply ships. Now, we'll see here that this is maybe turn 2, and on the previous turn, Yellow had built a base out on Ada for 10 credits. So they have a base established, and it's turn 2, so Ada is still available. We can't see that here, but Ada is still accessible to the player because it's in the closest ring, and even though they haven't upgraded their engines, they're okay to get there. Now, maybe they decide to take the transport ore and miners action. They would place one of their employees on transport ore and miners, and they would place another one of their employees, perhaps employee number 4, out onto Ada because Ada is accessible. Now, the employee they use is a generic employee and can transport 2 things, but they only have 1 thing to transport right now. They could theoretically send another employee out if they wanted, but it would be kind of a waste. Now, if we wanted to, the only action that this employee can take is to mine this asteroid. We would look at the basic employee, let's say that he's this guy here, and he has the ability to mine asteroids, either gray or black, and both of which would provide 1 cube. So he could choose to mine asteroids and decrease one of these cubes by 1. Let's say he decides to mine black. This would provide 1 cube out here for him to sell, either transporting it back to one of these ships here in order to sell it off if he had a contract, or transporting it back to his main storage area on his board in order to sell off, getting less money, but the same amount of victory points in the long run. So that's how that's going to work. With another employee later, he could transport again. Since he has a fleet capacity of 3 and has only used 1 movement, he could use another of his employees to transport stuff off of here, either transporting it over to the ship if he had a contract, or back to his base in order to sell later. So that is what employees out on mining areas will do. Once you're done with all of your employees that you've used, you have to pay them all of their wages, unless you didn't use them. If you didn't use them, you don't have to pay them, at which point you would reduce your costs and maybe be able to do more on your next turn, having saved some money. Well, there you have it. That is Asteroid Miner from Perhelion Games, up on Kickstarter now and looking for your support. This one is a very interesting and different feeling worker placement game in which you're buying new workers, and those workers have different abilities. So dependent on how you would like to use them, you can accomplish different things. Your basic workers are a little bit jacks of all trades, but as you specialize with different workers, for example, your pilot, are you going to want to use your pilot or your captain in order to mine? Well, it all depends. Do you have somebody else available in order to mine at that time? The fact that the game scales for 2 to 6 players and feels kind of different with different numbers of players is an interesting thing to me. The fact that you can play the game 2 players and you have a little bit less vying over different positions on asteroids. You have a little bit less vying over contracts, whereas when you have 6 players in the game, or 4 to 6 players, you're going to have more competition for different space on asteroids, and you may have to go out and upgrade your technology a little bit more in order to access more of those positions that other players perhaps haven't taken advantage of. And these are all things that you're going to have to pay attention to. Do you hire really expensive employees and have to kind of get a lot of contracts and sell a lot of things in order to maintain the wages for those employees? Or do you find the most efficient way to use a little bit less skilled employees? Do you even use all of your employees each turn? And figuring out which turns not to use them all on is going to be very important, because sometimes you're going to need extra money for your next turn, or you're going to simply not be able to afford to use all of your employees and have to figure out which ones are the least important ones that you can kind of afford to neglect for the round. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration. You have to figure out how to use your workers, how many workers you can afford, what they need to do, if you can use this guy for that, and what the best choices are all going to be. And it makes for a very interesting and kind of thinky experience that can either play quickly with the shorter variant and fewer players, or for quite some time if you're looking for a longer, more involved game. So if that sounds good to you, check it out. They're on Kickstarter now, looking for your support, and I'm sure they'd be glad to have it.
Thanks for watching our review today. For more information about board games, as well as the #1 board game audio podcast, Check out Dicetower.com for reviews, interviews, and more. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.